Yeah, buongiorno and welcome everybody to this very special event with very special guests from very distant destinations as far as Madrid and Singapore and Tours, and with very special guests with very different backgrounds. And these guests and friends are do not only happen to be here at the same time, they also share an interest or maybe a passion of the application of tools and digital tools and methodologies in the field of the humanities, and also an interest in digital objects as the objects of our research. So this event is organized in collaboration of the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities and the Dipartimento di Studi Umanistici and il Dipartimento di Studi Linguistici e Culturali Comparati, with Marina Buzzoni, who will also say a few words to welcome you. Then I will briefly introduce you to the first speaker, Carolina Fernández-Castrillo, and we have a second slide, Pierazzo, and the final presentation will be then by Andrea Nanetti.
Thank you very much, Franz. A brief presentation maybe in Italian, a brief introduction maybe in Italian. I would like to welcome you all to this event. Vi ringrazio per partecipare a questo evento e vi do il benvenuto anche a nome della UCD, dell'Associazione di Informatica Umanistica e Cultura Digitale, che attualmente presiedo. Ho visto che il seminario è molto ampio, come già diceva Franz, e quindi io non rubo ulteriore tempo per dare la parola alla prima relatrice, a Franz, che presenterà in realtà la prima relatrice, e auguro a tutti buon lavoro.
So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to Carolina Fernández-Castrillo. She's assistant professor of cyber culture and digital communication at Carlos III University of Madrid. She's also a research fellow here at our Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities, Foscari, where she leads the project Digital Media Culture, Intercreativity and Public Engagement on digital innovation and civic engagement in connective environments. From 2009, she is associate researcher at the prestigious ZKM Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, where she develops media art projects. She has been a visiting scholar at Yale University, and she won several prizes and has been teaching in many renowned institutions. She is responsible for the area of experimental learning at New York University Madrid, and is collaborating with the doctorate program of culture and media industry at Bayreuth University, a benchmark in transmedia studies. And today, Carolina will talk about the Hacktivist challenge beyond data visualization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franz. It's a huge pleasure to be back after 2 years here. And I would like also to have the chance to say thank you for the great work that you are doing, leading the center. And unfortunately, it's not often happens that everybody feels so well working together in an institution. And I think that here we're working, trying to collaborate and to produce new concepts, and from the innovation, theoretical innovation, also by organizing events, but also the human side is so important. So I would like to say thank you to you, because it's such an inspiring atmosphere, the one that you have created. And it's always a pleasure for me to be here and with our colleagues. So really, I wanted to say this for the first thing. And today I would like to share some of the results of our research that I have been conducting inside this project that I am leading here, that you have already mentioned, digital media culture, intercreativity and public engagement. And I find that there is a very big topic that is hacktivism in the field of media arts, but also in the sector of communication and information. and how, well, it's challenging in many senses, also for cultural institutions. And we will see some examples, especially from Paolo Cirio, and how his provocative artworks, well, are sometimes banned by some institutions, but his role is so essential in terms of also media and digital literacy, how he also contributes to make people understand which are our digital rights. So here I would like to explore how hacktivism goes beyond data visualization. And first of all, well, there are some areas that we should distinguish. And today I would like to mention which are the differences between info arts, investigatory art, and then a new theory that, well, I have been reflecting about, and I published a paper this year that is called the transreal condition. So we will see the differences, trying to, well, to see which is the current state of the art. And I would also like to mention that Paolo Cirio is going to come to Venice on Thursday. We have a meeting with him, and the idea is also to involve him into the center and maybe by, well, some events that we are planning. So we will keep you updated if finally it works. But I find that his contribution is very inspiring too. And starting with this big topic that I just want to, well, give some guidelines to understand what it's about. I think that, first of all, we have to reflect about the role of fake news in our present. And this is something that is not new, because in the past, we see that there have been many ways of manipulation and disinformation. If we go to the past, from a media archaeological approach, we see that we find it also, well, in the ancient Egypt and probably even before. And the myth-making is a powerful business, really, to promote truth as well as lies. And this is an old phenomenon that we have in our culture. From media art, we also find that there is an increasing number of projects that are focused on the current challenges of this hyper-connected society in which we are living, but also an informed society. Here it's also important the role of new media and how from the art we can fight against this situation by understanding, which is first point. Over the last decades, the artists have approached their relation with information in many different ways. And in media arts, we have so many examples. As I was mentioning before, we have info arts, interventionist media arts, investigatory art, and the most recent approach from Paolo Cirio that he calls it regulatory art. And we will see what is this about. I will mention his work because I think that he's leading, well, a position that is quite interesting to us in hacktivism by revealing the importance of radical democracy. Also, with the pandemic, we are reflecting about the role of democracy. We are thinking about if e-democracy it's a sort of utopia or not. So also from the art, we have this pressure of reflecting about the current situation, which are the future goals, which is the role of the democracy and the user and the audience. So this is something that covers many different aspects of our reality in our post-truth era. Let's start with info arts, this concept that is not new, not at all, but well, here it's like a huge umbrella that covers the artworks in which information is the content and the medium of new pieces. I am showing this monography that was published in 2002 by Stephen Wilson, Information Arts, Intersections of Art, Science, and Technology, edited by the MIT Press. And here, maybe it could be interesting for you because he provided many resources on organization, publications, conferences, museums, educational programs, research projects. Even if it's a bit old, it still works because all these organizations are the ones that are developing still nowadays all those projects. But I must say that almost 2 decades after the publication, I find that this volume lacks of an overview of specific art action. That's the point that maybe it's not covered in this volume. Well, an ambulance, I think, is coming, or something is happening. Yes, as I was mentioning, sorry about the noise, is that here I find that this text lacks of maybe some examples of art action. And it's very focused on how to visualize data from others, from other researchers, from other institutional processes that may be interesting, but there is not this part of art action, of guerrilla, that we find in investigatory art, for instance. And he mostly focuses, Wilson, in the relationships among art, scientific inquiry, and technological innovation, instead of looking for new ways of artistic expression. It's not so experimental as other examples that we will see during this seminar. And regarding some case studies in info arts, we see here one example. I am going to choose some of them just to make you know how it works. There have been so many artists that have played with the barcodes and ID technologies. And here we have an example from Perry Hoberman's Barcode Hotel from 1994, in which the artist confronts the visitors to in an environment where everything is coded. And here the aim was to make the audience feel this alienation of the human being. We can be also a barcode somehow, and how our existence is translated to data as a simple barcode. So here we have this attempt to, well, to reflect on this new technology, on how the information is processed and how is the situation of the human being in front of this context in the 90s, in the late 90s. We have also many examples of wearable camera. Well, maybe the most important and most famous is Sherlock. In fact, this example reminds me of him. We see Steve Mann artworks. He is known for his wearable camera. And what is interesting about his experience to me is that he says that, well, when he was recording everything with this camera and uploading in that same instant to the website, he had some problems with the security guards and noted that organizations that had constantly control on us when they are recorded are not so comfortable with that. So this is something that we will find also in Paolo Cirio's artwork. It's like, I'm going to do what I am receiving from you, and we will see what happens, and which is the legal system that we have. In case they don't protect us, we have to fight for that. Surveillance is another huge topic in media arts. Here, there are so many examples. I'm just going to show you one from the very past, from the 1991 Big Father, that is a Simon Penny's first installation. And here also we see how the data, the information that are collected from our movement can be also be part of an immersive installation, and how we feel the pressure of the information that is surrounding us. Data visualization, this is a huge topic and also very interesting for our students. And there is a fight that is so important also in terms of professional goals when they finish their studies. In media arts, there are so many examples. Here, I would like just to show you one that is from Donna Cox, and she's an artist that always collaborates with scientists in order to, well, to show which are the main, the ways to help in terms of media literacy, and in order to see how can we visualize information that is complex in a very easy way, and also exploring the user-generated contents. How can we interact with that information? So here, just one example. Well, she's very known, and she obtained an excellence award from the journal Leonardo. So in any case, if you want to look for more information, she's a very important example in data visualization. There are other examples, databases and research processes. For instance, here we have an example from Stephen Wilson, the author of this monography. And in the late 90s, he created an artwork that is called Crime Silent. And in this case, he created a living map. And we can see the information about the statistical levels of crimes in San Francisco, minute to minute. And well, his contribution was also aesthetical through the use of lights, motion, and sounds corresponding to all this information, instant information. But as you see here, well, we don't have this guerrilla side that we will find in investigatory art. That is very close to the idea of investigative journalism. And here, the main difference is the critical approach. Here we have some examples from the past, from the late 60s, for instance, in which the artists were trying to make visible the invisible mechanisms of the institutions. And there is one example from Hans Hackett in 1970, when he created an installation inside an institution, a museum, and it was a sort of survey. He was gaining information from the visitors real time, so it was very interesting in terms of research. And also he was asking about the feeling they had about the institution itself. So it was pretty critical about the space in which was settled the installation. And it sounds, well, maybe naive, but at that time was very innovative. Also in terms of being, well, one of the first examples in which we have real-time information, because it was projected at the same moment that the information was taken from the users, from the audience. So it's one of the first examples of immediate, interactive, and contingent exchange of information in media arts. Then we have, well, Paolo Cirio. I met him, well, no, I don't met him. I saw his work in 2014 at Ars Electronica, and I was very impressed about one of his works that I'm going to show you later, that won the Golden Nika Prize, that you know that is like the Oscar for media artists in Linz, in Austria. And I find that what he's doing is very close to the interventionist art, and he aims to denounce and fight against unfairness, inequality, and to give information that probably is not covered by traditional media. And this is something that is very interesting to me, because I work for, well, a department, a communication department, so also understanding which are the limits of our new media, not so new anymore, is something important, and how with the pressures of the system, of the power, well, there are some news that are not there, not in newspapers, not in new websites of these huge companies of information. And Paolo Cirio believes that the artist has to do something about that. And how can he is interesting to me because he reveals information that we don't know using hacker techniques. He is very interesting in terms of data visualization, but also in terms of involving the audience, the users, activating crowdsourcing processes, and how we as users are part of the creative processes, and we can reveal also new information. We can also act into the reality, and that's the most important part of everything. It's not just knowing that there is something invisible that has to be shown to the society, but also trying to change it from the inside by the use of hacker techniques. That's the main difference between what we have seen before and the current state of the art. So here also there are many relations with the concept of action art, the idea of anti-art that we have with the old avant-garde, with the Dadaism, Futurism, but we have this part that is the guerrilla action, that maybe is the most interesting of all of them. And well, he's trying to meld life and art with high art, low art, something that we also see in the avant-garde, art without a pedestal, art in the street, down in the street. And what he's doing in terms of literacy, in terms of knowing that we have digital rights, for me is very important. And also as a theoretician, he is quite interesting. There are so many essays in which he develops also his reflections on the topic. Here, we don't have so many time, so I just want to mention, well, this theory, the recombinant fiction, in which he tries to mix reality and fiction in some artworks from his beginning, in the roots of his works, always relating very important topics like legal and financial inequalities, political coalitions, financial crimes, military abuses, human rights violations in the digital age. And with this idea of recombinant fiction, well, he tries to also make us be aware of the fact that fake news are so inside in our society. Even if we are at university, we have studied, it's so difficult sometimes to establish which is the difference between the reality and the fiction nowadays. And imagine young people. So he developed some projects related to, well, to the global warming. In this case, we have a project related to espionage. This one is from global warming. It was an experiment he conducted in a high school in New York. He created well, this person that was like a sort of classmate that was interacting with the students through social networks and giving information that was sometimes fictional, sometimes real. And well, it was very controversial in many senses because being in contact with this person for young people, well, it was sort of illegal, but he was playing also with the limits of the information, how far we can go and how far we can access young people and how they can be critical or not regarding what they are receiving. But what I want to see today with you more deeply, just the last part, well, he's also here, you see just very quickly, some terms and some theories that he's developing from the information ethics, participation versus coercion, emancipation versus exploitation. So, well, it's also very interesting. You should check his website if you want to explore even more about that. And this is the artwork that I saw at Ars Electronica that won the Golden Mica in 2014. And it's one of the most famous artworks he had developed. In this case, he was playing with the idea of well, creating a provocative action and participatory model to engage the audience. It's a performance revealing and protecting the legal tax systems behind economic inequality. So he found some companies that were committing fraud in the, I don't remember, it like very exotic Cayman Island, I think it was the place. So he took a lot of information about companies that information didn't exist before. It hasn't been published in new media. So he got all this information, and what he did, he said, okay, now I'm going to explain to you, to all the users, how can you do the same thing? It's like, I am not going to fight against them. It's true that he was doing that because he was revealing the identities, but he went even farther. Like, okay, I'm going to tell you how they are doing this. So let's do everybody. So democratizing the crime somehow. I will show you just a very short clip of this project.
Yeah. Listen, people, listen to what I've got to say. Yeah, yeah. Now, why don't we all stop paying taxes? I said, now, why don't we all stop paying taxes? We stop paying taxes, y'all. Well, why don't we all stop paying taxes? I said, now, why don't we all stop paying taxes? Stop paying taxes, y'all.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's up to you. Let Mr. Politician know how you feel. Let him know that you're not going to take no more. Stop paying taxes. Stop paying for corruption and injustice. It's up to you.
Stop paying taxes. Hey, now why don't we all stop paying taxes? Stop paying taxes.
Well, as you imagine, it has been so controversial, but this is part of his style, to provoke, to make people be aware of the situation. And one of the recent works that he has developed is Capture in 2020. And it was a year I met him virtually because of the pandemic. And he told me about this in August. I didn't understand really well what he was talking about, but after a couple of months, wow, he was everywhere, in New York Times, everywhere around the world, because it has been so polemic. In this case, he took some pictures that have been published in media of French policemen during demonstrations, and he processes all these images through a facial recognition software. After doing that, as part of the project, he created an online platform in order to crowdsource the identities of these policemen. He asked people to say, okay, give me the name and the surname of these people that are policemen. And he obtained around 4,000 names, if I remember properly. And well, imagine, it was so controversial. Also, he created some video interventions, street art actions in Paris, photo installation. And when there was going to be the opening at Le Fresnoy, it was banned by the Ministry of Defense in France, imagine. But he knew that it could happen. but it's part of the process. And what happened is that in that case, he created also this campaign, Ban Facial Recognition, the European Union, and he received that letter, this letter here from the European Commission, in which they say that they agree that the use of facial recognition and other biometric mass surveillance technologies risks having a chilling effect on our democratic political culture. Well, we thank you for your active involvement in the protection of human rights and freedoms. It's like, yes, we know that we have to do something. Let's see if they do it. But at least he tried to do it. And something very interesting he told me during our conversations is that also the role of hacktivists has changed. In the 80s, there was a more anarchic style from hacktivists. But nowadays, the new generations want to be regularized. They want protection. They are asking for protection by these institutions, these huge institutions. So there is a huge difference between the style over the last decades. And here I was looking his Instagram account because I follow him, and I know that last week he was in Rotterdam, and this exhibition is moving around the world. So at VTU, it's now there is now an exhibition. Also in Madrid, there was well, a short showcase in Feria Internacional de Arco. So well, there is a lot of street art work regarding this project. I would like to show you a short video in which he really explains what is this project about.
I collected 1,000 public photos of police officers taken during protests in France. I then processed them with facial recognition software to profile 4,000 faces of officers that now can be identified by name. I don't have anything against the police. I just want to demonstrate that facial recognition is above them. Police officers are just people, but they can use violent tools. So the police need to be accountable if they use those tools against citizens. At the moment, there is an asymmetry of power, where citizens are surveilled while the police is not accountable and they can hide. I want to show that this asymmetry of power is not fair. After all, this is not about technology, nor about the police. It is about democracy.
well, he explained it much better than me. But you see here the street action that is also a part of well, his style that I really appreciate, the way in which he moves through this digital, well, post-digital condition that is very fluid. We are moving between the online, the offline context all the time. And this is so important also in terms of activism nowadays. And well, which are the conclusions that we have after knowing a bit more his work, and what I think that can be considered like the transreal condition? Well, here we can establish some areas in which he's playing with in terms of how to use the information. There is the first step, that is the investigation, the research on invisible realities, data collection, translation, reproduction through a very huge, wide range of new technologies like data mining, hacking, fact-checking, open source intelligence, social media contents. Then we have the visualization, and there we see that he's an artist, how he's trying to give this information in an aesthetical way, in an engaging way. Also provocation, it's essential for Paolo Cirio and in hacktivism. This is an essential point that all the hackers somehow have, and is the creation of hacking interventions, videos, interviews, websites, performances in public space in order to gain the attention of the audience, the people, the citizens in a very huge way. And here there is a creation of social networks, platforms in order to interact. And I am very interested in that part, how also the creation of contents, user-generated contents, is part of the provocation, and how the artists are trying to take the users as part of the process, like in that same level, in an horizontal way of creation, a very democratic way, a new way of conceiving also democracy somehow through the use of new technologies. And finally, the regulation, what I mentioned before, that nowadays the hacktivists are trying to, well, to regulate the situation, not to fight against the institutions, but asking for protection, and also making people be aware of our situation, that we have some rights, some digital rights that we don't even know. So here, the very final conclusion to me is that, well, artists as Paolo Cirio and hacktivists can exert this pressure on economical, legal, and political decisions on a global scale, and how the role of the user is essential to do that. So we are now talking in terms of collaboration, co-creation, intercreativity, and this is essential in order to change our reality, and how through the use of hacker techniques, we can reveal information that we can, well, we can share that information, that we can also change that reality. It's true that it's not legal many times, so it entails risk, and also it's in terms of well, legal challenges, it's also very controversial, but it's something that we should pay attention on that from the digital humanities. And yes, this was the research that I wanted to share with you, and I will be so happy to know if you are interested to collaborate, because it's something that is still alive and still a work in progress. Yeah, and there are many future events and maybe publications in which we can collaborate. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carolina, for this fantastic introduction into your work on the work of Paolo Cirio. And I have to admit, I'm a little bit nervous to meet you on these Thursdays. So I never had lunch with an Oscar awarded artist so far. So I'm really looking forward to do something together with him, with you here in Venice. So I'm super grateful you bring him here to us, to Venice. And we have 10 minutes, 5 minutes maybe for questions. So maybe we have a general round of discussion at the very end. So, but now specific questions to Carolina's presentation and her work are very welcome. So those present in this wonderful aula in Foscari, please choose the microphone of your choice. And those from home connected, just leave a note. I'm not connected. Can I check with you in the chat, or just put put on your audio and say that you have a question, and please try to be short so we have more room for also other questions. Anyone in the chat? Anyone here? So I would be interested, not to lose time, how does the art market react to his activism or activism in general? Because I mean, the art market is very greedy and wants to commercialize everything that is art, and otherwise it's not maybe art, supposed to be art according to their definitions. So how does this react? And is Paolo Cirio rich from his art, or how
no,
does it?
unfortunately he's not. Yeah, and it's not easy because, well, we want to organize something with him, and this was a plan. Also, I would like to do something like curator with his work. And it's true that it's not easy to find an institution that it's, well, from my point of view, that is so personal, so brave to cover all these topics, right? But he's pretty successful this year. He won the honorary prize in Ars Electronica again, because, well, he's opening new ways of thinking in many senses. So he's very recognized by the sector. But it's true that in economic terms, he's also developing some artworks in which he criticized the art system, the economical art system, so it doesn't help very much if he's doing that. But yeah, institutions like V2 and like more experimental and innovative, well, Le Fresnoy is also a point of reference, but it was in France, so it was also normal. We can understand that it was banned. It's not completely fair, but well, we can understand which is the infrastructure and the frame of institutionally. If you are gaining money as a public institution from the France government, it's something that he knew. So he's not rich, but he's also loved by media artists and theoreticians. And it's not easy. For instance, this year, his artworks came to Madrid, to this Feria del Arte, Arco, that is very private and very commercial. And I remember that I gave a talk related to his work to the ICEA that was in Barcelona, it was like a pre-conference. And someone asked me, wow, if he's so controversial, why he is going to Arco? We don't understand. And I say, yes, it's true. For example, in other contexts, when I talk about his work in post-communist countries, it's like so loved and everybody's so interested about this topic. But it's true that he has also to cover the commercial side in terms of gaining visibility, because he's trying to say, everybody, we have digital rights. So he has to cover all the aspects in society, all the eras. And this is something that I completely understand. If you are just in the underground system, your work has no sense, because it's a democratic fight. It's something to change the reality itself. So you have to go everywhere that is possible. It's true, in Madrid, for example, now I am thinking about where can we do something there. And it's not easy, because there are many institutions that I am pretty sure that they don't want problems. And with Cirio, you risk, but also you gain protagonism in media. So you have to be aware of how he works. So yeah, but he's not rich. He knows how to be, because you saw the tax avoidance system, but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, please. If you choose a microphone, so those connected from home can also listen.
I found very curious the artist chose the aesthetics for loophole for all. That is a very pop aesthetic. The music it's like a pop exploitation, R&B, very catchy music. And the aesthetics, it's like a very pop, very, it's an aesthetic like the early social media. You know why the artist choose this aesthetic? For me, it's like he would say to everybody, to the public, it's something everybody could do. It's hacking. It's a pop action. That's my interpretation. I'm very curious the aesthetics of loophole for all.
Absolutely, and he's playing with that idea of the pop culture, the advertising, because it's an ad, really, because he was asking for, I don't remember, I think it was 90 cents. Like it's not for free. Yes. So if you want to know everything, you have to pay 90 cents. So at the end, it was an ad. That's why the aesthetics are very related to the pop culture and everything with the music is so optimistic. And yeah, and it's also the point that I was mentioning before, provocation. So yes. He's provoking also through the use of advertising. So probably it's because of that it reminds you on pop culture, that is so related to the advertising system. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like pop culture, but also early social media aesthetics from early 2000 and something. It's very similar also. Thank you.
You're welcome. And maybe related to this, when I talked to him, I asked him, because he started from cinematography studies, and I asked him why he was interested in digital technologies, why he became a hacker. And he said, it's something that now is useful to me, but I am completely open to any medium. Now it's working. And that's how I feel and how I can interact and how I can reveal this information. But something I find also very interesting is that he's so flexible. And through the hacker techniques, he's, well, gaining attention and producing a massive work and acting into the reality itself. But probably in the future, he could be in another field with other media. So it's pretty flexible. So it's very conceptual what he develops. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no further questions, I suggest to proceed, and thank you, first of all, Carolina, once again for this presentation.
Thank you very much.
Maybe in the meanwhile, I may start my brief presentation, because Elena actually needs no presentation at all, I would say. Elena, who is now based at the University of Tours, is an outstanding scholar in the field of DH, of digital humanities and digital philology in particular. Her book, I have her book here, a physical version of her book, not a digital version. Digital Scholarly Editing Theories, Models and Methods, published in 2015, is a sort of Bible in the field, both for students and for scholars. Elena is endowed with a particular gift, I would say, that of expressing complex ideas in a simple, though not trivial way, and this is a real gift. I had the privilege to publish an essay in a volume edited by Elena and Matthew Driscoll, and it was an impressive experience. You used, for example, collaborative methods of co-working, and when co-working was all in its I would say, embryonic stage. And the title of her presentation today is Digital Genetic Criticism. There's nothing more practical than a good theory. We all know, by the way, that Elena has been and is still involved in many projects, some of them as the PI of the project, and that she is former chair of the TI consortium. So she's very active. She has been, and she's also very active in the field.
Thank you very much.
The floor is to you.
Thank you very much for this lovely presentation. I'm so happy to be here in my alma mater. As you know, I studied in Venice. It might seem useless to reiterate here the importance of studying the author's draft manuscripts and the different versions of their works, or to underline the difficulties of this type of studies, since genetic criticism was founded in the 1970s, and the criticism of draft manuscripts even before. The so-called Critica degli Scartafacci, according to Contini, was born in 1937. But what we take for granted in certain scholarly environment is not so acquired elsewhere. And more generally, the importance of the critical contribution offered by the study of the genesis of a work does not reach all scholars in literature and musicology, let alone students and the general public. Basically, the idea of studying a literary work as a process rather as a finished and immutable product opens the door to a completely different conception of literary creation and presents us with a new meaning of textuality in its becoming. In this context, the text is much more fluid, problematic, and rich than its clean and tidy layout suggests within a printed book. A study of the author's papers, scraps, drafts, notes, shows us these aspects in almost iconic way, as in the case of this sample of Tosca's libretto. Here's the layers of corrections, false starts, reformulations, versions that appears at each opening of a page take us directly to the author's laboratory, also introducing us to the physical and one would say dirty materiality of writing literature. Nobody can doubt the enormous pleasure felt by the scholar in handling the papers and the paperwork of the authors, but this pleasure cannot remain a private fact or become a phenomenon of fetishism. It must be communicated to scholars and readers. The latter are generally particularly interested in this type of material if one is to judge the long lines of visitors when the author's manuscripts are presented in exhibitions. I'm thinking, for example, of the Yeats manuscript exhibitions at the National Library of Ireland, the queues to see Jane Austen's manuscript at the British Library, or the Manzoni autographs exhibition at the Braidenses Library in Milan. In fact, it is my belief that the work of the philologist should not be limited to communicating the results to the narrow circle of philologists or specialists, but should invest in the dissemination of the research result to a wider audience. It is therefore with this in mind that it is necessary to interpret my paper today. In fact, I believe that the commitment to cultural mediation is a deontological duty of the scholar of textual criticism, as well as of other disciplines as well, especially in our contemporary society hungry for content and at the same time submerged in unfounded or even false information. It is precisely in the field of dissemination that the paradox of genetic criticism in particular is most clearly manifested. In fact, one of the great problems linked to the dissemination of the results of genetic criticism is the difficulty of demonstrating the indisputable importance of this research and of presenting the results in a friendly and easy to use way, first of all to all scholars, but obviously also for the great audience. Critical editions and genetic edition on paper are on the one hand too heavy, physically and metaphorically, and on the other hand too difficult to understand, crowded with a forest of diacritics and layers of meanings that these represent, not to mention the sometimes prohibitive cost of these volumes. An example is offered by the genetic edition of the Herodias by Flaubert, edited by Giovanni Bonaccorso and his team, where we find 9 different types of arrows to indicate 4 different correction campaigns, 3 types of brackets for deletion or reconstruction, as well as underlining and italics, with the consequences that the edited page is almost more difficult to read than the manuscript page itself. One might perhaps conclude that the attempt to translate the layers of writing and the accidents of the manuscript into symbols is not the right solution. A different approach is taken by the national edition of works by Alessandro Manzoni, and in particular by the Promessi Sposi, published, as we know, in 3 different versions between 1921 and 1840, and now available in 6 volumes in folio, a volume of text and 1 of apparatus for each version, each of them about 700 to 800 pages. In this case, the editors have chosen to offer the clean text and to describe the condition of the manuscript in a separate volume of critical apparatus. And those lists of diacritics exceeds 6 pages. The result is not only that a few have the moral and the physical strength to unravel this apparatus, but also that the complication of the systems of diacritics
was too much for his own editors, as a careful examination of a sample of pages conducted by me and Alessio Marini to try to encode the text in TI has revealed a series of imperfections, certainly due to the complexity of the chosen notation. A third editorial model is offered by the edition of the handwritten libretto of Tosca, published by Gabriella Viaggi Ravenni in 2 volumes, one including facsimile and the other the diplomatic transcription of the text. This transcription uses colors to indicate the various contributions to the text. Illica and Giacosa, normally credited as the only authors of the libretto, but also Puccini himself, Giulio Ricordi, the publisher, and a professional copyist, probably employed by Ricordi. The attempted representation is undoubtedly masterfully conceived with a truly innovative focus on clarity and ease of access. The almost total renunciation of diacritics in favor of colors is a winner. But although the edition pushes the limits of the printed edition beyond the usual boundaries, the temporal relationship between the various contributors, as well as their dynamism and antagonism, fail to emerge at the opening of the page and remain confined within the description in the introduction. Digital technology has been cited several times as a possible solution, or even the solution, for this impasse, and several attempts have been made to take into account the textual variation between the different versions and to manage the layering of working manuscripts. These attempts, which date back to the early 90s, were only partially successful. Some, such as the first experiments carried out by Jean-Louis Lebrave and Daniel Ferrer with the hypercard software, are no longer accessible due to problem of technological obsolescence. Others focus mainly on the hyper-diplomatic representation of manuscript in a sort of competition between the author's page and the expressive capability offered by the digital screen, as in the case of the edition of Madame Bovary manuscripts. These last attempts, if they seem to offer a solution to the needs of a certain number of scholars, nevertheless stop upstream of the actual genetic criticism, which includes the possibility of studying the different versions from a qualitative point of view and understanding and to understand the composition process. In fact, before offering a digital edition of documents, it would be necessary to distinguish the different theoretical issues that characterize genetic criticism, for which the new medium could offer new opportunities and even solutions. At the risk of oversimplifying the matter, and I beg my colleague, the geneticien, not to blame me too much for it, I have distinguished 3 lines of research relevant to critique génétique and philologia d'autore that can benefit from the contribution of the computer. First, the representation of authors' papers. This task is only partially carried out by digital facsimile, as authors' manuscripts are often difficult to document to penetrate without specific skills, and therefore transcription remain almost mandatory. Furthermore, transcription should not be considered as a mechanical transposition. Like all transcription and representation exercises, it is in fact an hermeneutic activity that forces the researcher to discern all the linguistic and semiotic aspects of the document. In this point, we can perhaps also include the organization of the dossier génétique for its constitution and to internal organization. Second, representation of the author's creative process, that is, distinguishes in what order and at what stage the creative elaboration of the different parts of the page have been filled, to which elaboration stage they correspond. If you like, it is the art of the critique of the Scartafacci, right from continuous seminal contribution, but also of the critique génétique, whose main objective is not the constitution of the critical text of a work, but the reconstruction of the creative process. This process often has to be reconstructed starting from multiple documents. It is not uncommon for writers to use multiple writing media at the same time. An example of this approach is offered by the creation of a small prototype concerning the Manzoni draft that I conducted in collaboration with colleagues in Italy, Giulia Raboni, Paolo Italia, and with Alessia Marini, intern between Grenoble and Parma. This prototype centers on the draft of the first 2 versions of the work, and in particular chapter 4 of Fermo e Lucia, and Sposi Promessi, the novel's new title, which has the particularity of cohabiting on the same page. In fact, Manzoni has set the final version of the Fermo Lucia, the right column here, to the printer, but very quickly became very dissatisfied with his effort, and as soon as the printer returned his manuscripts to him, began the rework of this novel on the left column of each page, which he had left blank in the first instance. This rewriting will soon become too invasive and radical, with significant displacement in the addition of patches, the so-called paperoles in French, and the Manzoni will opt for new white sheets in the pursuit of this rewriting. But for the first chapters of the two works coexist, and sometimes the second version reuses pieces of the first and sometimes replaces it. The prototypes try on the one hand to make the dynamism of the page obvious, with text zone appearing in the order by which they were written, by showing the frequent back and forth between right and left, and therefore between the two versions. And on the other hand, it also tried to represent the textual stratification in the form of a dynamic critical apparatus. The operation is only partially successful, as the digital edition is only marginally more readable than that occupied the 700 printed pages mentioned before. To face the partial failures of the first prototype, I made a second attempt to represent the textual evolution based on the model developed by the versioning machine software, and now used by several other software such as the CI CAT, which separates the different layers of writing in parallel version as they were found on different sources. In my quest, I also use AVT2 software, which shows the various layers of writing as versions, each with their own apparatus. Once again, the attempt is only partially successful because it requires the artificial creation of sources, even when we have only one document. In my example, for instance, I've created 3 arbitrary layers: a base layer, a top layers, and intermediate layers. But I do not have a substantial justification for the constitution of these avatars of the text other than the tool needs it. The third point is the representation of the evolution of the work. In this case, it's a question of diachronically seeing the evolution of a work through multiple publications and re-edition, often very different from each other. It is very rare, in fact, especially in modern times, that an author stops at a single version of a literary text and often reworks and republishes the same work many and many times, arriving too often overturn the initial layout of the text. A diachronical analysis, for instance, of the evolution of Umberto Saba's Canzoniere and of Leaves of Grass of Walt Whitman exemplify this trend in an emblematic way. Lately, I have concentrated my attention to a type of textuality that, in my opinion, challenges the issues seen before, namely opera librettos. In reality, the question of digital genetic criticism of opera librettos needs a preliminary analysis tackling the problem of the particular textuality they present, then the relation with the music, their independence and interdependence from it, and the fact that they are not stable or a complete system. An opera libretto is the typical representation of a text. Textual typology could define the fluid, as used in John Breyer terminology, or what I have called in other places Heraclitan, opposite to a complementary to a so-called Platonic textuality. Let me explain. A Platonic text is a text which the demiurge editor postulates to exist in a state of purity and perfection. The editor's task is first of all to uncover this text in its perfect state, and then to present it to the other humans left in the cave. Heraclitan text, on the other hand, is a text that changes and continues to change even after the death of its author. It is a living text, a text to be used, as are all the texts intended for the stage, such as the opera librettos and all theatrical texts in general. Compared to drama, however, the opera librettos has on the one hand a greater stability, On the other hand, it has a greater possibility of ontological contamination. If in a theatrical production of Romeo and Juliet, for instance, we can expect everything from a so-called philological version to a version set in the outwardly space, perhaps with a surprise ending, for the opera, we still expect to hear our favorite arias, and that there are not too many plot surprises. But it is true that we could listen to pieces that were never included in the libretto and are only present in the partitions, or even pieces or verses that are neither in the libretto nor in the partitions, but which they have become common in performance, or even reading passages that were never set to music, with a contamination between the libretto as a literary text, the musical score, and the theatrical practice of staging. In this case, the libretto, in the case of libretto, in fact, it is not always clear what we are talking about, namely the printed libretto, or the words sung on stage, or those included in the score. And while these three are three distinct entities, they are also in constant and changing relationship with each other. The textuality of the libretto is also combinatorial. In some cases, we have sequences called ossia, alternatives, already foreseen by the authors, which leaves the field to the choices made by the conductor, the director, the production, or the skill of a particular singer, or scene which can be inserted or omitted at will. The case of the Don Giovanni ending is well known, for example. In this, the libretto is not unique. In fact, there are combinatorial literary texts, either by genetic choice or by necessity. Famous are the cases, for example, of the Book of Disquet of Fernando Pessoa, or even Petrolio by Pasolini. In both cases, the author left the text unfinished, and leaving to the scholarly editor with the task of putting pieces of the puzzle together into a more or less coherent whole. However, it also seems that in both cases, this text remained open to free combination, also, and perhaps above all, by the will of the author. From an editorial point of view, these texts have been resolved in different ways. For Petrolio, editors opted for the rather traditional edition, somewhat crystallizing the movements of the text into a specific Platonic form. While for the Book of Disquet, a recent digital publication offers the reader the opportunity to read the text following the combinatorial order proposed by the most important critical editions, even comparing to each other, but also offers the possibility of creating one's own combination according to personalized criteria. As for the modern edition of librettos, the ontological uncertainty of textuality, where the text is at the same time independent of music and interdependent with music and scene, has led to hybrid editorial practices, which integrate and sometimes accumulate in the printed pages passages and sequences that come from different entities, libretto, score, performance, without really dealing with the creative process that generated them. I believe that a methodological reflection on this point is fundamental and long due. From a genetic point of view, the torment of notebooks testifies of the difficult progression of adaptation of the text to the music and the music to the text in an intricate and often inextricable process. The fluidity of the text is manifested in an emblematic way in its genesis, which is never a direct path from the first version to the last, but is a tortuous path made of detours, dead ends, stops, and changes of direction. We understand how Puccini is a composer who often intervenes in the text of the libretto, as well as Ricordi is a heavy-handed publisher. But how common is this fact? In addition to the case of Tosca, mentioned above, we have come recently to discover that the genesis of Fanciulla del West librettos is another very tormented case. Otello's case is very complicated, as well as Don Giovanni. What we must ask ourselves at this point is whether these are really particular cases and are not in fact something systematic, with the implicit consequence that the multi-authorality of librettos should rather be recognized as central, intrinsic, and necessary phenomenon for this particular literary genre. Once the fluidity, ontological uncertainty, and multi-authorality of the libretto have been established, one can therefore ask how to edit this type of texts and how to present them to the readers. The recognition of this type of textuality with its proper and not accidental ontological status leads us to say that, for example, the critical reconstruction of any version of a libretto, may it be the one attested by the last edition printed during the author's life, or the one attested by the final version of the score, cannot be the point of arrival of the editorial work, but its starting point. Or, to quote again the master of all Italian philologists, just the initial working hypothesis. Marrying such a textual concept involved making very specific editorial decisions, thanks to which the scholarly editor must stop playing the role of the demiurge, omniscient interpreter of the text, to playing the role of a mediator, a facilitator of the editorialization process, of which the reader becomes co-protagonist. Given the difficulties of papers edition for managing this type of textuality, we can also ask ourselves what the digital can do in this case. Unlike printed paper, which is fixed and characterized by a sense of finality, and which therefore lends itself poorly to the representation of magmatic nature of the textual librettos, digital is a flexible and unstable medium, which therefore offers itself in a natural way as more suitable for a representation of a fluid textuality. As we have seen, one of the opportunities offered by digital is the possibility of leaving a certain initiative to the reader, who can then interactively choose which text to read. Already at the end of the 90s, Espen Harseth offered as a theoretical framework for what he called the cybertext, which he defines as ergodic, from the Greek ergon, fatigue, work. It is in fact a text that does not depend only from the work of its author, but also of the readers who co-construct the text by making choices, which allow to open some path, to close others, and finally to create a personal experience. It is important to note here that, regardless of the philological choices of presenting the text in a stable or fluid form, the digital system with which the text is offered also assumes an editorial role that cannot always be completely controlled by the editors or by the readers, as Marcello Vitali Rosati observed. Digital edition often rely on complex digital tools, the CMS, which offer certain predetermined features, the so-called affordances, that in fact influence not only what can be done with the text, but also what one can think of and about the text. But even when the digital publication system is produced ad hoc for a specific case, it is inserted in a medium, usually the web, which allows to the fragmentation, the contextualization, distortion of editorial intentions. Whether we like it or not, once the text is put online, readers can do more or less what they want, with an ease and an immediacy completely unknown to the printed medium. In the management of the weaknesses of the libretto, and particularly of the draft, digital technology can show many of its potential. On the one hand, by highlighting the nature of this textual material, the building sites of the authors, and on the other hand, by allowing the editor to organize and present the writing material according to different points of view. For example, by presenting the sources by many authors, by the main authors by type of text, chronologically, by type of document, according to the order of the final text, by level of finiteness, by phase. Finally, from yet another point of view, allowing readers to choose one or more criteria to organize their cognitive experience. For librettos and in general for music sources, we can further imagine, for example, the preparation of different paths by type of performer, combinatory features designed specifically for an orchestra conductor, other features offered to amateurs, and others again offered to readers of the text or to the textual scholar, and so on. This way, the text or fragment of text will not only be classified by type of source, but also by type of use. The preparation of ideal paths, therefore, has the dual function of leaving a certain degree of freedom to the reader's users and preventing them from getting lost in the mare magnum of the dossier génétique. This approach actually outlines a new role for the scholarly editor of a Heraclitean text. The editor represents a regulating principle capable of offering the Ariadne threat to the readers to find their ways. In fact, if many paths can be offered, not all these possible paths are equally founded on documentary and documented facts. The editor becomes a sort of storyteller who narrates the tale of the text, which shows the options, which offers explanations on the reason for some choices, which therefore gives meaning and life to the various documents. In reality, if you think about it, this role is not exactly new. Even the stemma codicum and the critical apparatus have this function, that is to give order to a disorder, to classify and order the variants. However, the data model that stemmas and apparatus offer is too simple for a fluid text and is ultimately unable to account for the complex compositional events at stake. Indeed, the attempt to complexify the format of the apparatus is only partially successful, as we have seen. Today, my presentation offers more questions than answers and intend to open a conceptual and theoretical discussion on the nature of fluid textuality, on the nature of digital medium, and on the most appropriate philological practices for this type of textuality and for this type of medium. This discussion must necessarily precede any possible proposal of digital representation of these texts, in order not to run the risk of creating simplistic models that trivialize the complexity and the richness of fluid textuality. In fact, the idea of creating a friendly system for the user and the reader for fluid text does not mean reducing the fluid text to a stable text, but studying ergonomic representation methods that allow highlighting the complexity. There is nothing more practical than a good theory. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elena. Thank you for your very thoughtful and lively insights, the insights you gave into the dirty materiality. I took a note because I liked this idea a lot, the dirty materiality of the text. And thank you also for touching upon the role of the editor and the readers in building this, the idea itself of the text in this mouvance or mouvant environment, I would say. So now I think that we have at least a 5 or 10 minutes discussion. So 5 minutes for discussion. And so
there is a question. Oh, Eli Blicker.
Yes.
Online.
Online. Please unmute
Hi.
your microphone and
Yeah, cool. Hi, Elena.
Hi, Eli.
Sorry, hi. I can't start my video because the host has disabled it. So I'm sorry for that. But hi from Amsterdam. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it, of course. And I was wondering if you could expand a bit upon how in this thank you, how in this fluid reading environment editors would present uncertainty. So they are a guiding principle. They offer different ways of using or reading the text to the user. But what if they are not certain about a specific order? Do you have any ideas of how to present this uncertainty to a reader?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think we need, first of all, to think which is the model we want to offer and what is the affordances we want to offer to the readers. So what do we want them to be able to do? Namely, do we want them to see the uncertainties and assess if what our uncertainty is just bullshit or if it is a good question? Or do we want them to see two alternative possibilities and to choose by themselves? So in a sense, it is a completely different approach. If we want them to judge us as editors, we always say that scholarly activity is to allow the user to evaluate if the scholar has done proper work, or do we want, on the contrary, that they simply choose by themselves without, judging us? This is the first question I would say. I think that this, in the past, we always focus on the first possibility. Say, okay, we do give all the data because our work needs to be reproducible and need to be verifiable by the readers. But what if we would say, okay, you verify, but you choose yourself anyway? There is that. So it kind of say, because for librettos in particular, there is no right choice. There is no right possibility. In a sense, production for Tosca, I've done all the possible choices, even the one that were not authorized by the authors. I don't simply care what the authors said, what they wanted. Same for Mozart. For the Don Giovanni. Don Giovanni has 3 different endings. Which one is the right one? For all 3 and none of them, because they were all constrained by so many factors. At the end of the day, for this kind of textuality, there isn't a right choice. The uncertainty is just, to begin with, the point. And it's just, you can choose. You see what I mean? So there are texts for which, yes, there is the right choice. And there is an uncertainty. And you can present this and discuss it and say, you can choose one or another. And we believe this is 80% right and this is 20% possible. We can give colors, we can have grade or no grade, we can give explanation, we can have a video explaining why we do think this is not right or not. But for this kind of particular materiality, the libretto, there isn't a right choice. There is only the choices that have been made by such and such circumstances, and so what. I mean, there is all, for instance, every night you go to see Tosca in a production, they may have singing differently, which is right. There is no right.
Thank you. I really like the idea. It's like these books in which you can choose, like turn left or turn right. And you have a different narrative.
Oh yeah, and it's like that actually. If you think of for Romeo and Juliet, you will never see 2 Romeo and Juliet that are the same. But if you go 20 times, 100 times to different, even on 2 nights in a row, it will be different. So in a sense, there is a right and wrong in the textuality, yes, maybe, but there is also, we have to take in account the performance. Performance is something we have excluded from our pattern of editing, particularly for drama, or more than drama, I call text for using them, usage text. I don't know, there is not even a name, text that we use all the time. And we allow ourselves to do things. And while it is important to know what the author said, yes, it's also important to know what the author said, because the text is alive.
Yeah, it's about ownership also. Who owns the text?
Who owns the text?
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a brief one, may I? just about once again, about the idea of dirty materiality. To what extent should this dirty materiality be handed down to new generations? I mean, is all the information you find in manuscript, for example, relevant in the same way for an editor, for a philologist, basically, and for the users as well?
Right, definitely isn't.
Yeah.
But there is things that are more important than others, like there is texts that are more equal than others. Definitely, that's why the editors is the regulatory principle that explain these things. You know, but the other point is that to see how text is constructed is, every time I show you to my students, if they find it refreshing. We have this idea of these works of literature as a monumental, untouchable. There's something that came out of parthenogenesis from the brain of the authors already perfected. And the idea of working hard to produce something good is something that they are not contemplating. So, for instance, showing for the first time when we did the manuscript of Jane Austen, that was the first edition ever, considering that Jane Austen is the most read author in English language, and there are sold more copies of Pride and Prejudice than of the Bible. Nobody before us ever produced an edition of the manuscripts. And they're very clean manuscript, relatively clean manuscript, but people were shocked by it. That she may change her mind, and punctuation is not perfect. Oh my God, the life is, like we know, is the end of it. I mean, it was shocking that there's still this idea of works of literature as monuments. They are arts, they are living things. They were at the time and they are today. In a sense, the digital allow us to be more free with them. And while there is not saying that the scholar does not have to do the job, on the contrary, it has, even more so, because it has to propose more to the users. You have to be more engaged with these readers. And that's what I think is important.
I do agree with this fact. Thanks a lot, Elena. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you also from my part, Elena. So that was a nice finish also for my course in digital philology, and I saw there's at least one student present, and others also here in the room. So we now move on from the creativity, the artistic creativity of hacktivism, to the record and representation of the creative process as executed in genetic criticism, to the engineering of historical memory. And I'm now happy to introduce you to Andrea Nanetti from Nanyang Technological University of Singapore, where he is associate professor. Andrea has studied history and scienze storiche between 1986 and 2000 in Italy, France, Germany, Greece, and the United States, and he has always been interested in working in the intersection of humanities, sciences, and computational sciences. He is the founding director of LIBER, a lab at the School of Arts at the University in Singapore for arts, design, and media studies. He's a member of numerous committees and learned associations, among which the Comitato per la Pubblicazione delle Fonti per la Storia di Venezia. He developed an interdisciplinary method called engineering historical memory, the very topic he is going to present now, and is collaborating with more than 120 scholars, libraries, museums, archives, and editors on an international level. Among these, Marina Buzzoni and Eugenio Borgio with the Marco Polo project. And this is now what, if the technique is ready.
I think
so.
Do we
encounter problems?
Qui funziona, qui no. Posso attaccarmi qui?
No. Ecco qua.
Ok.
Un attimo solo deve fare l'accesso su.
Ok.
Non te l'aspettiamo per questione di privacy.
No, privacy. Vediamo se funziona.
Voila, here we go. So, thank you, Andrea. And I
non so anche che lo possono vedere
ok.
persone, se no altrimenti è difficile.
E dopo ti chiedo per i video. Okay, thank you. I'm quite happy to be here. It's a real pleasure to be back in Foscari and to meet all the new friends. And I thank especially the Department of Humanities that is hosting me as visiting scholar,
and the Center for Digital and Public Humanities that is growing. And every time I come back here, I see something new, you know, not only online, but it's the amazing vibrancy of the community that is growing here. And especially now, you know, because you have been vibrant and vital even during COVID, you know, which is something extraordinary. So I'm looking forward to being part of this community in the future as well. Today, I will give you a brief presentation, a sort of advertisement, I would say, of engineering historical memory. Let me start, before getting into the presentation of the initiative, let me give you a little background on the keywords that I'm using, starting from the engineering, which is simply the design and the building of structures. We design and build structures for the to make historical memory become machine understandable, and ultimately make history, a traditional discipline, shift into the computation. Historical memory in this process is a set of processes by which societies create narratives about historical events. So, and we are getting into this creation of narratives, understanding how narratives have been created and how we create narratives based on those narratives, which we call historiography. And now historiography is becoming more and more fluid because of the media that we are using. So yeah, historical events in this context are construed as the treasure of human experiences, namely the heritage that society have used to remain resilient and express their cultural identities. In this, being agreeable on this basis, we understand that history has been used more to divide people and to build nations one against the other, instead of building bridges and unite people in the world. The understanding that we are having of this initiative is peculiar for two reasons. Because the vision is that what we have as global societies is a multilingual and transcultural approach to historical memory, that somehow by individual historians or national narratives are pushed one against the other. And we leave it in funding agencies. Funding agencies worldwide fund regional projects or want to see how the benefit of taxpayer money is going back to those taxpayers in that specific city, region, or nation, or aggregation of nations. There is nothing that is transcultural and multilingual and is embracing people all around. This initiative that we started with a few people in 2007 and 2008, when I was at Princeton, is now growing thanks to different countries. And we are about, let me see if we can. We are about 120 people in different countries, and we have built a little application to show how we are located and how we work. Today, I wanted to present you just two examples. One, let's say, finished application, which is the one for the from our map of the world, which will be launched, I would say, for the second time at the end of this month, possibly on the 21st of December in the Marciana Library. And users with the QR code will be able to decodify and to enter the from our map and to use different digital tools together with the original artifact. So the first tool is a high resolution navigation that allows the user to get into the map, in front of the map, or maybe later at home, or when something is identified, to recognize the context and to have different layers of approach, because we know that different people and the same people in different occasions need different information, different kind of information. So instead of giving overwhelming sets of information, we allow people to browse the map or to go and search for a specific item. This is the mythical draconite gemstone used to prepare a medicine. If someone is interested in more, can get into the, let me see. Let me see if I can do it with the thing. Okay, with the mouse it works better. So we open other information tools that give you an approach to different items into the web, starting from very simple and trivial stuff like a wiki page or something like that, or identifying the geolocation of the item, or getting into something a bit more sophisticated, which is an algorithm that is making a federal search on Scopus Elsevier, on Taylor and Francis, on the China National Knowledge Infrastructure, on the Russian databases, and many other places, to give you in real time how many materials are available for that topic. And here we have 51,000 publications, 136 images, and about 678,000 of videos. This amazing amount of videos that is growing is becoming a resource and a problem as well in filtering. And I'm mentioning it because we are working on that thing. So when you are getting into the system, if you are even more interested, you open and you start to get, for example, here what Taylor and Francis is proposing, and what other repositories are proposing in videos as well, or getting into more. More are simply the repositories that don't share the APIs. So we have APIs that are not public for several reasons, and you can access them only getting into the specific website. This is a way to navigate. The other way is to use advanced infographics to search in the map. And of course, you have a parallel view. Of course, you have the satellite view or the OpenStreetMap to have a geolocation related to modern countries. Or you have other ways to visualize. Here we are in the place names, and to give you different approaches to the same data and to the same information. Here on the spot, the user can see that in the From map dated 1460, a big part of the toponyms are in what is today's China. And another glimpse is that the knowledge of Italy was at the same level of Ethiopia and Iraq in terms of number of place names. So these approaches that we have developed, or to have a false direct graph, can give you a different understanding of the map, or search in different ways. Another application, which is something that is a working application, is something that a collaboration between the University of Florence, the Laurentiana Library, and Nanyang Technological University for the study of the treatise by Francesco Giorgio Martini, annotated by Da Vinci. And we have the simple browsing, as you have seen in the other map, and we access the critical edition, the translations, the commentary of the drawing, and of course, when we get into something specific, we can access the algorithm for the publication, images, videos, and more that can be reached by other programs as well. What we can do now, can we show the video? Now, I show you to get to the conclusion here, so because it will be easy to browse. The approach is that we provide the critical edition of the materials in collaboration with the editors and publishers. So it is an action of cultural diplomacy most of the time, because we have formal agreement first with the author of the critical edition, if still alive, and after, with the principal agreement of the author, we approach the publisher. And after that, we approach the translator of the edition. When we have all these materials, we start to touch the content. Without this agreement, we don't access the content. When we have this agreement, as we had for this manuscript, we approach the content, we deconstruct the content, we connect it to secondary literature, and we start to work on different media, like this example. Because when you see a drawing into that manuscript, rarely you understand how it works. And here is an example. On the right, here you have the Da Vinci note flipped now, and on the left you have the Martini drawing.
Anche un castello è da fare con due dipendenti visi. E a ciascuna una lomaca, ovvero vezzosa, dove le manuelle, per esse girare, mettarsi postino. Negli anelli da piedi delle viti un traversato palo, in mezzo del quale la rappata catena che alla correggia della colonna va, la quale, secondo che saglie, sotto la colonna calzando, pezzo per pezzo, esse rappate catene schiavare e diminuirsi possa. Perché le viti non più che 3 piedi per volta tireranno. Che posato il peso, esse calar bisognerà. E così di in parte fare, siccome la figura 36esima ci manifesta.
We have made a number of these videos and applications to show how, in the reading of technological manuscripts or medical manuscripts or any kind of manuscript that is dealing with real life, you need to go beyond philology, and you need to be able to explain what's going on into that piece of text, which is in a library nowadays. But it was something very practical for the use of architects. And you need to show this continuity. At the same time, you saw the map, and we did the same kind of understanding, connecting the map to the sources of that map, primarily with Marco Polo, with Ibn Battuta, and with other Chinese travelers. that are included there. One last thing that I wanted to show you, if we can identify, possiamo vedere l'altro video? No. Sono tutti qui.
Questi qua.
Ah, eccoli. Okay, okay. Just to conclude on the cloud-based system, you can see how we work on information visualization, and there is an application that is investigating different approaches to infographics and information visualization for digital history. A new approach here is what we are developing in collaboration with UT Delft for the image search without using metadata. And this is a video created by
what is the
Philip
EHM
Weinmeister.
image search for digital history? The EHM image search assists historians in finding visual resources online. In today's world, the amount of images usable by historians is increasing exponentially. The more images we have, the more difficult it is to find relevant images when they're necessary. Existing search engines are not sufficient because they rely on keywords linked to the images as metadata. These keywords place severe limitations on image search. Because words belong to one specific language, metadata in another language will be left behind. And even within languages, the choice of keywords is arbitrary and can generate ambiguity. To address this challenge, EHM explores solutions to searching for images without using keywords. EHM aims to make images machine understandable and empower algorithms to learn beyond what they're programmed to do. In image search, this can be done in multiple ways. One way is to make use of template-based matching, which works by moving a template across an image, marking regions with high similarity, and finding the best fitting location. Another approach is feature-based matching, which marks similar regions by analyzing color, shape, edges, and other relevant details in the image. Lastly, to learn beyond what the engine is programmed to do, the search engine can use deep learning methods. By providing image data, the algorithm uses multiple layers and connections to make a decision on its own. Experience image search for digital history and support EHM.
And with this, I think I can conclude this advertisement/presentation. And of course, I'm always open to discuss the initiative and to collaborate with other research teams. And I wish to thank the funding agencies at the end, last but not least. This project has been made possible in the last years by 4 Microsoft Research grants, by 4 grants, tier 1 grants by the Singapore Ministry of Education, and by other grants by companies and by private agencies worldwide. We are using the funding quite carefully and mostly to invest in manpower, and the younger the people are, the better it is for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrea. So this was excellent advertisement, and I think it's really important that the wider audience and public takes note of these wonderful tools and this platform. So we now have, I think, again, another 5 minutes. We can go over time here for questions to Andrea, and then maybe also if someone is feeling inspired in this wonderful day to even connect to the other presentations. So that's also very welcome. So please leave a note in the chat, or just unmute yourself, or grab a microphone here in our aula and pose your questions. And I'm very much surprised also that you are a director of films, so congratulations on this.
Producer.
A producer.
Sometimes, and director. Sometimes, yeah. I got into animation and film recently.
Carolina.
Well, congratulations. I find so interesting everything you have mentioned. And regarding the graphical project of the map,
I am not sure if I got the information. I was wondering if also are allowed user-generated contents to expand the information related to each specific point.
You mean to add information? So users can interact with the editorial board and can propose an addition of information. So it is a curated website. We didn't open a forum for discussion in that specific case. We opened a forum in other applications, sometimes less controversial, and we let the audience have a sort of chit chat on what they are doing. And we started with the information visualization, which is quite a technical discussion because everybody is interested in information visualization. Very few people have the expertise to make information visualization something that grows from bottom up. Usually we take applications, we use ready-made things that we find online, or we pay software houses to develop this kind of things. On the application that you have here, we give to historians primarily, but to other scholars, the tools to understand what they might need and how to make what they want to make with very small effort.
Is that interaction the users?
Yes, the user can add best practices, which is the best way to learn how certain specific tools have been used by other scholars worldwide. And we did it with 6 main visualization tools that we selected on Apache among about 14,000 visualization tools. And they are the best practices for historians online. What historians usually use with a benefit.
Are you planning to have also perhaps offline events like immersive installations to access information?
Yes, we had it. We made it at the school. Usually is the end of semester show, and students this semester made an installation to explore the Framauro map, connecting it to other materials, and to fill the gap between an audience that doesn't know anything about that thing and that fabulous artifact. So, and they had an installation, which is you get close to to a large screen, which is like this wall. You know, it is a huge screen, and in front of the screen you see the map, and you can interact with your smartphone. When you start to interact, you make little things. You know, you search for places, for goods, for other things, and you start to be engaged. If you want to learn more, after you can have the other thing. We made other kind of experiences like the gondola VR that we developed here in between Venice and Padova, in which we collected documentaries about the making of a gondola, which lasts about 12 months. We compressed them into a VR experience, and is becoming an immersive space if COVID-19 allows it for us. Other experiences are planned for Guangzhou, in which we are working on a panorama to explore the navigation charts of Zhang He in connection to the Framauro map. And several other things, you know, like the machines that you have seen here in the Laurenziana Library will become an exhibition.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
More questions? Checking the chat. These are really beautifully connected, all these resources in these various formats and visualizations. But I would ask from the other direction, the data that is brought together on this platform, is this also, I mean, can this be used as a transporter to grab information on a central point as
yes,
this platform,
yes.
So that you can use it?
Allow it because I didn't show you the back office, but it's quite simple because in order not to be affected by the obsolescence of technology, we based our backbone with very low tech. So we are using essentially spreadsheets, but tons of spreadsheets, connected one to another. But all of them are quite simple in their technological needs, and they are, of course, updated constantly by the companies that work on spreadsheets. And we link it to other tools that at the same time are open access tools all the time. And as you have seen, we are based here on OpenStreetMap for the geolocations. And we are growing in the collaboration more and more with Wikipedia, which is a two-way thing. So it means that the Wikipedia page is referring to the EHM application and vice versa. And instead of criticizing, we try to make those pages become better, if possible. And students love it in a kind of educational pattern. Instead of criticizing Wikipedia, go there and write something better if you can. But the spreadsheets, just to answer that directly, are shareable.
That's fantastic. That makes it a very attractive tool, I would say.
Yeah.
So, very good. Congratulations.
A brief question on the images and how to compare them. Which method you showed us the three methods basically based on
For image search.
Yes, which is the best?
It hangs on. Of course, the deep learning is the best one. But deep learning needs to be monitored in a very sophisticated way. So template matching is the basic one. It's quite easy. It is what you find also when you drop something on Google. It's template matching plus after you hook the keywords. You get into keywords again. We started to work on Europeana with deep learning. Now we have 3 students in UT Delft that are starting their master dissertation, and they are working on developing, getting further into the algorithm. So the algorithm works pretty nicely now. It's slow, that's the point, And we are allowing users to get into virtual machines for free on EHM. That's why we advertise softly, because having many users, it can become an unaffordable cost on that. But so far, everything is free there. And you can access and use the virtual machines for different searches without paying, and don't realize that the virtual machine is paid by the system. And for image search, it will become something a bit more complex. And as Frank knows, we are developing now the new algorithm is about sentiment analysis, but is a trial and error, we are not really sure that we can be able to do something in that field that can effectively help historians, but we are exploring the field. For image search, for certain, we can get more. And we are testing it on the Da Vinci and the Francesco Giorgio Martini manuscripts to find other items worldwide.
I think that it could be useful also for images that are found in manuscripts.
Of course, yeah. So once the algorithm works and you get into the deep learning phase, you can train the algorithm in your own data sets and start to learn more and more about specific features. Now we are doing something specific on Bosch. This is another application that I didn't show you. But we are working on Bosch, which is quite fascinating for different items and the different interpretations. And we are linking the little items that are in Bosch paintings to all existing literature, secondary literature, about those specific items. So it is a fragmentation of secondary literature. Luckily, Bosch has a secondary literature which lasts about 100 years only. And it is in a few languages, less than 10 languages. So it's quite rich. But when you get into Ibn Battuta, Marco Polo, Jean Coeur, and you travel inside the Indian Ocean, everything becomes more complicated. And this is what we love and what we are going to do with the Marco Polo branch. Yes. Yes, because in the searches on the web, the little thing, you know, that you have seen into the video is that it is strongly biased by languages. It means that you can find things using keywords in English, possibly sometimes in Chinese, but I wouldn't say nothing more, you know, extensively. And what about Hindi, for example? Now we are working on the 6th UNESCO Fort Hills in Rajasthan. And of course, most of the literature is in Hindi. So try and find something in Hindi on the net with your browsers. Your browsers try to direct you to something that is commercially valuable. And maybe there is nothing in Hindi commercially valuable for them in relation to you. So nothing is offered to you in Hindi, which maybe is the most valuable source that you can find there. But many other things, you know, if you see the travels of Marco Polo, you have literature in every single country he traveled, in all these languages, and they are almost inaccessible. And it is not acceptable in today's scholarship.
A phone call.
It's late.
It's late. So thank you very much, Andrea, for this wonderful finish. And I'm tempted to draw a connection also, picking up a statement from Paolo Cirio, that it's not about tools. So I have to correct myself in the introduction. It's not tools or methods that are our shared interest, but democratization, so yes, democracy. So I think there is a very strong connection and ethos of our work that brings us together here, and why we are doing these things and apply technology to humanities research. So thank you very much for this. Yeah. I think we can conclude here with a very wide horizon of activities and projects that have been presented here today. So thank you very much to the presenters, Elena, Carolina, Andrea.